At the end of 2023, AYN shook up the emulation handheld scene with the release of the unprecedented Odin 2. For the first time, we had an Android device with flagship phone level of performance and power, starting at just $300. It quickly became the go-to recommendation for top-tier emulation for people who didn't want the extra size and weight of the Steam Deck. You could emulate pretty much everything available on Android all the way up to the Nintendo Switch. Fast forward just 6 months and AYN dropped the Odin 2 Mini. Same performance, same specs, but now in a sleeker Vita-style body paired with a 5-inch mini LED screen. While it might not have made as big of a splash as the original, it still found its niche and maintained the same great price-to-performance ratio. Now, over a year after the launch of the Odin 2, AYN is back with a bold question. Can they do it again? This time, they've taken the same powerful internals and packed them into an all-new form factor with an epic 7-inch OLED screen that blasts your face with rich colors and incredible contrast. But is making it bigger and slapping an OLED on it enough to keep it relevant with no performance upgrades for over a year now? Should you just buy a Steam Deck, bro? Let's dive in and see if AYN can really pull off a third one in a row, or if this one falls flat. Inside of the Odin 2 portal, you'll find a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 powering the device, which is a couple generations behind, but still a very solid performer and widely supported. A 7-inch 1080p OLED screen at up to 120Hz, and this does look amazing. 8, 12, or 16 gigabytes of RAM, and 128, 512, or 1 terabyte of storage. I personally bought the Pro model with 12 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage. The base model is probably fine for most people, but the extra internal storage is nice if you plan on installing larger Android games like Genshin Impact or Zenless Zone Zero. All of this comes in at just 430 grams, which is about 200 grams lighter than a Steam Deck, though the ergonomic grip does add a little bit of weight, and we'll talk about that later. Again, I cannot understate how good this screen looks. When you're at high brightness, the colors and contrast really pop on this screen, and my eyes appreciate the size bump up to 7 inches. Motion isn't an issue with the OLED, and you get the choice of either 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, the latter being an excellent choice for streaming. There is one small issue though, and AYN seems to have acknowledged it and plan to work on fixing it, and that is when you're in a dim room and you really want to dial down the brightness, the screen does start to get a little bit murky and have a green tint. This is the same panel used on the iNeo Evo and possibly the F1 Pro from 1X Player, and I think that the Evo also exhibits this problem with the green tint, so something to do with the panel, drivers, or timing, so hopefully these companies can resolve that. The issue doesn't present itself at moderate to high brightness, but I did want to mention that it is there. The sound that comes out of the portal is fine. It's not going to win any awards, but it's relatively clear and comes out of front-firing speakers, which is always nice to see. It doesn't have tons of bass or warmth, but it certainly doesn't take away from the gameplay experience at all. The portal feels pretty nice in the hand, and the all-glass curved front looks pretty and feels good in your palms. The backside has ergonomic bumps to help you grip the device, but I will note that the black plastic can pick up some light smudging. I do, however, have some middle-of-the-road impressions on the ergonomics. It initially feels comfortable in my palms, and I don't feel like the buttons or sticks or a reach or anything like that, but it is a bit slippery when holding it upright, and I found myself being a little creative with my grip and having to use my ring and pinky fingers to support the device, which can be a little bit fatiguing. The macro button also happens to be smack dab where I would prefer to put my fingers to grip it. I did order the ergonomic grip case, but it was sent separately, and I won't have it for a week or two. I hope that the grip adds what I'm looking for to make my grip feel better, but I am not wild about having to have a separate grip to make it feel better, and it doesn't fit in the stock case from AYN and adds another 80 or so grams in weight. Speaking of how it feels in the hand, I want to draw some attention to the triggers. I feel like AYN went a little too wide and a little too shallow, and the pivot angle is slightly off. When I initially gripped it, the meat of my finger was riding on the hard top edge of the trigger, which wasn't great. I adjusted my grip some, but then made it a little bit less optimal to support. This might be a case of my particular grip, as ergonomics can be very subjective, but at least without the grip, it's only a B- for me. It's not terrible, but it's not amazing. We've got new joysticks that are supposed to have a larger range of tilt, and AYN provides a second set of sticks that are larger than the standard ones. These larger ones can also accommodate joystick toppers, which get you pretty close to full-size stick territory. However, it was brought to my attention on my recent live stream that out of the box, they are calibrated to a square output, and in the cardinal directions, you reach the max output of the stick before you actually fully tilt it all the way, so you're losing some range and accuracy. Through a convoluted sequence, you can adjust the sensitivity, and I wouldn't have even been able to find out how to do this if it were not for my viewers telling me how to get to this menu. I set it to about 80%, and now the sticks have more range and can be more accurate and have a more circular output, but I couldn't get it perfect. You can see that the circle isn't perfectly even, and the sides are lopped off a bit, and it's not uniform in all 4 directions. I tried going through recalibration before and after changing the sensitivity, and nothing changed. Maybe this is something that AYN can address in a future OTA update. Regardless though, this didn't impact actual gameplay a whole lot, but again, I did want to draw some attention to this issue. The face buttons are well positioned, are a good size, and have a decent travel and not too much activation pressure, and overall they're pleasant to use. However, again, for someone like me who prefers a quiet device, they are very annoying. If you've used a Retroid Pocket 5, you know what they sound like. Clack, 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 clack. For some, that's not a big deal, but hey, it bothers me. The D-pad here is precise as always, clearly Vita inspired with a nice tactile dome switch activation. I wouldn't mind if the corners were a little bit more rounded and soft, but overall it's a very accurate D-pad that I cannot really complain about. Okay, but what do games look like? The most important part. Freaking amazing. Amazing. Especially with the black model, non-widescreen games just blend into the device and they pop because of that OLED screen. Systems like GameCube and PS2 both look and perform amazing on this device, and I can't really think of a scenario where you'd actually need more performance outside of a couple titles that are just hard to run, no matter what device you use. And thanks to the ability to add GPU drivers like the turnip drivers and Sudachi here, you have pretty decent compatibility with Switch games. The 8 Gen 2 chip in here is still plenty capable of playing many games at a minimum of 720p docked mode, and a decent chunk of games in 1080p. In some cases that means it looks better than a Switch OLED because you are getting more resolution than the Switch while still just being a 7-inch OLED screen, 1080p versus 720p. That's not to say everything will run. Android Switch emulation is in very unpredictable territory right now and can occasionally be a major headache to get a game running, but that's not a fault of this device in particular, more the stagnant emulation after Nintendo went after and shut down a lot of the big emulation development. And of course, you can play Android games smoothly on this big stream. Games like Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, and Call of Duty Mobile all work flawlessly here. So, to answer the question I posed in the beginning of the video, yeah, the performance is still enough. We haven't seen very much meaningful emulator development, and in some cases have completely stalled out, like I just mentioned, so throwing more power at the issue isn't going to necessarily help. Keeping costs down by using a chip that isn't the newest is probably a wise move on AYN's part. One last thing I wanted to mention, and probably my favorite use case for the Odin 2 Portal, is game streaming. I often will pick up the Portal instead of my Legion Go or Steam Deck because it is so light and the battery can last all night if I'm streaming. Due to the larger OLED screen and the improved sticks, the Portal is actually way better than the Odin 2 or Mini for this use case. While I don't have a PS5 or Xbox to demonstrate console streaming, I do like using Artemis and Apollo, which, if you didn't know, are forks of Sunshine and Moonlight game streaming, and I use those to stream my desktop PC to my handheld. GeForce Now is also an excellent option if you don't have your own gaming PC to stream from. With this setup, I get only about 7 milliseconds of decoding latency, meaning that for the most part, games feel like they're being played natively on the device without any lag. Being able to kick back on the couch and play Ghost of Tsushima on this beautiful OLED screen and not have any heat or fan noise is pretty amazing. So, should you buy the Odin 2 Portal? Well, I don't know. I'm actually probably going to keep my Aya Neo Evo over the Portal because it offers essentially all the same features while feeling better ergonomically in my hand, but I also don't know that I would recommend the Evo for a variety of other reasons. It's definitely a lot harder to recommend due to price and some service issues that Aya Neo has had in the past. I do plan on doing a shootout video between the two soon, so subscribe and keep an eye out for that if you are trying to choose between the two devices as your next high-end Android handheld. If you're already happy with your Steam Deck OLED, or you prefer the smaller size of the Odin 2, the Odin 2 Mini, or a Retroid Pocket 5, no, you probably don't need to upgrade. You don't always have to chase the newest thing, and those all are amazing handhelds that still accomplish most of the same stuff. But if you, like me, are an OLED screen lover and prefer a bigger screen for your aging millennial eyes, yeah, it's a pretty damn good value. If you like to do lots of game streaming, the extra real estate and better sticks are really great. If you want the ultimate retro emulation machine and you're not worried about native PC gaming, then I don't know that there's currently a better device out there, particularly at the $300 to $400 price point that this is offered. If you're often somewhere with poor internet connection and you just want to play PC games, then yeah, just buy a Steam Deck OLED or an Ally X. What do you guys think? Did you already order one? Are you thinking about getting one? Are you gonna wait for the Odin 3 someday? Retroid Pocket 6? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think that this, if you've been waiting for a flagship Android device and you haven't already bought the Odin 2 yet and you don't want that big Steam Deck like I mentioned, then yeah, the Odin 2 Portal might be the device to recommend right now. And anyways, thank you for sticking around with me and have an excellent day. And yeah, subscribe or like or bells or something like that. Peace.